Hi, guys, and welcome to the Suit Up Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Adkins. Thank you so much for being with us today. Today, we have another great episode. I always like to get the business part done first. We so appreciate you continuing to subscribe to the channel and like and comment. We love suggestions for future podcasts. And of course, you can go back and watch some of the previous ones. I've even watched a couple several times myself. So appreciate the support. Be sure to watch the episode all the way through to the end because we do have some really cool information for you to share. And you only get that if you go to the end of the episode. So today I have a great pleasure of having one of my great friends with me, Mr. Beau Brown.
Hey,
how you doing, my brother?
Oh, I'm wonderful. How
Good
are
to
you?
see you, man. You're looking sharp today. I like that navy blue suit. I think, look at this. We had the same kind of, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm like, this guy, he shows up. I'm like, man, I think we're wearing almost the same suit. I got
to keep up with you, You set the trend, and I have to follow it.
I appreciate that, bro. I appreciate that. So again, welcome to the show. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do. I know you're very multifaceted. Your resume is like 3-4 pages long in a good way, Yeah. But yeah, just be sure to share a little bit about what you do, and we'll go dive right in.
So Beau Brown is my name. I'm from originally from Michigan. I grew up in upstate New York, and I moved down here to Richmond. I've been here for about 23 years, and I've built a network of people like yourself that I have a really high quality of life around these parts. So I enjoy life quite a bit.
Good.
So
specifically in your career path, I love to talk about really entrepreneurship journey. So, where did it kind of start for you career-wise? And let's talk kind of like eves and flows of what you've been able to accomplish over the years.
Yeah. So I went to the University of Richmond, and once I got out of there, I really started at a CPA firm, local CPA firm, kind of got my feet wet in the accounting area there. It was a great experience. I mean, they were very old school.
Oh, of course.
In today's world, that'd be an HR nightmare,
was it like Mad Men, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, 70-year-olds in suits.
Right. Come on, man.
The secretaries and all that.
Bro, I have to pause you for a minute because my dad was a 40-year CPA, sole practitioner.
Yeah.
And I worked with him for like 15 years. Yeah. So I got to see the generation that grew up, really the working force in the 60s into the 70s and the mentality of that.
Yeah.
And you watch that show Mad Men, and it wasn't all like that, but there was a lot of similarities, right?
Yeah, very different culture, from that standpoint. I mean, they did have a dress code where,
absolutely had a dress code.
I was out on audits, and I had literally 3 weeks worth of suits. And back when I'm 23 years old, 24 years old, and I'm going to these audits, I got suits that are hanging off me. Like I got them from Goodwill, and I was trying to take them and get them tailored.
Build the closet.
Just have enough clothes that I can go on a 3-week audit and not worry about not having something to wear. But it was a very suit and tie mentality. Yeah. But at the same time, they kind of. I sat there and I looked around and I kind of had this realization, and I looked at all the partners and I said to myself, do I really want that?
Mm-hmm.
These guys are 65 years old. They barely see their families. They do well for themselves, but they're also all like way overweight, because they stare at a screen 70 hours a week and don't move. They don't, and I said, I don't know that that's the quality of life I want to stay on this path for the next 40 years, right? So, from that standpoint, it was a really tremendous experience. Those guys were a wealth of knowledge.
I was getting ready to say the knowledge that you pulled from that you're using today, like some of the stuff that I learned, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because being in the practice, being in the accounting, knowing about business and finance and running a company and taxes and everything, that stuff is invaluable. Yeah. Granted, I wouldn't want to sit in a cubicle all day for 40 years doing it, but let me get a little bit of experience and then take that knowledge and then move on, anyway. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that was the beautiful part about being at a smaller firm. I mean, they're more of a regional firm than they are one of like the big four or whatever. And those continue to consolidate even. But they threw me into the fire. Like I was doing things that if I was at a KPMG or something, I wouldn't touch that stuff for 10 years, in a career arc. So for me, I got a lot more breadth of experience and direct experience with working with partners, which that's the beauty of working in a smaller firm. And when I left there, I went to go work for Philip Morris International, and that's as big as international corporate as you get. I think they're Fortune 50 or Fortune 100 at the time that I was working there, and just a massive company. But just there you just had access to different levels of people. I did board of directors compensation when I was there. That was one of the elements of what I did. And I literally had the richest man in the world's personal information in my drawer. Wow. Because I had to send him statements every quarter once I did all the mark-to-market calculations and send their statements out to him. And, and I've got, the CEO of Fiat called me one day and just on my direct line and just to change his address on one of the statements. And I was floored by that because... Right.
The shoulders in which you're rubbing and to find yourself like I'm in the middle of
absolutely. It was just a very, you go from this smaller, more boutique regional CPA firm to this multinational corporation. Right. Yeah, and it's just a completely different feel, and you're doing things that would never apply to just a regional firm somewhere, and that also was a great experience because I was doing overnight commercial paper and no small company up the street is trading commercial paper in the overnight markets, so
right. It's 24/7 it seems like.
Yeah, so I mean, and a lot of those bigger companies holding on to cash like that is critical because they make so much extra money off of utilizing that extra time, whether it's a week or 45 days or whatever their payables cycles are. Sure. They trade that money overnight to try to make more off of their money until they have to pay somebody else.
I love it.
So, that's the kind of mentality.
Trial by fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and so shortly after that, is that when you branched out?
Yeah, when I left there, I kind of got, I got antsy, and I said, I really think I could go and do my own thing. And I left and
that entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah. 2013 was when I left there, and I so it was about a 9-year journey for me on working for myself. And I got my real estate license. I mean, my dad's basically a very high level lumberjack to make it simple.
Sure.
And so he managed a lot of timberland, and we as a family, we have a few pieces of timberland that, we have to deal with, year over year. Sure. And so, for me, getting a real estate license and just kind of getting my feet wet in that industry, kind of helped me conceptualize, or and shape the direction of where I was trying to be. And
right, of course.
And, especially in those early phases of entrepreneurship, you just, you don't have the direction that you thought you did when you made the decision to go out on your own.
Okay, so you're saying it wasn't easy.
No.
You mean it just didn't roll out for you, bro? It was just a piece of cake, huh?
No, and I quickly realized that I was almost a little too honest for sales in the residential market because most people
tell
don't
them like it is, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I'm giving them, $250 an hour accounting advice, and it's just like, yeah, we don't care. And I'm like, yeah, but you're outside of your budget. You're so beyond what you really can afford, and nobody wants to hear that when they're buying a house because that's an emotional decision, and it's not driven by the bottom line. Like I was so used to having everything that I was interpreting driven down by what is the profit when you get done at the end of the day, right?
What's that P&L look like, right?
Yeah.
And then buying a house, really like, man, I like the wallpaper in the bathroom. I don't care about, what the bottom line's going.
Yeah, and I don't care about the drapes, dude. I don't. I'm not one of those.
Come on, man! You don't care about my drapes back there?
I mean, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. This is a beautiful set.
I got him there. He's like, I don't care about the drapes, man. I love
it. But at the same time, like, you can kind of equate that idea of like the way it makes you feel, right? And I realized I had this tremendous gap in the way that I thought about things because I could not empathize as well with that kind of, I call it the cul-de-sac mentality of you're buying into a neighborhood, right?
That makes sense.
You're sending your kid to school, at a specific school, and they talk about the real estate markets at the local level, and you're not supposed to talk about the school districts and all of that, but it's what drives the value of real estate.
People,
and it has for generations.
Yeah, they love that kind of thing, bro. It's emotionally driven. So I'm going to put a bookmark here, because what I'm hearing is there was an opportunity in your area of personal growth.
Yeah, whoa, totally.
So there was, you're going through, and I like this because we're gonna circle back around to this, starting in corporate America and doing the small business, and then going out on your own and realizing that it is a totally different world.
Yep.
In entrepreneurship in regards to working, the traditional 9 to 5, and dealing with the general population.
Yep.
And you realize real quick okay, there's areas in my life that, I didn't you don't know what you don't know, right? I hear that a lot.
Yep. And
then you go through and you're like, okay, I need to work on this particular area of, being able to empathize, that it's all not necessarily about, the black and white and what the numbers in the bottom line are. It's more about the emotional response, how to deal with people, how to learn to relate to people, all those kinds of things. So how did you focus on that in your journey? Because you're not that way now, obviously. So
yeah, well,
what'd you do?
We all grow, right? We all have a growth journey of our own, and I always thought I was a fairly emotionally intelligent person.
Sure.
I've always felt like I've had, the ability to empathize with people, and I really did in a lot of ways, but it was a bigger blind spot than I realized, and it's the realization of it. That is the bigger piece there, because there's other areas where, like time blocking. It sounds so simple, but when you are going from, I work 9 to 5, or, in corporate America, I was working a lot more than 40 hours a week.
Of course, yeah.
So I was working 50, 60 hours a week a lot, and which was also part of the reason I got out of it, because I wanted to spend more of that time with my daughter.
Sure.
Because I could recapture about 15 hours a week with her. And that was
That's
huge.
important, bro.
That was more important than anything.
Yeah.
So, and it still is. But I realized that I could recapture my time, and I think that the time management piece is such a critical piece to understand before you even get out into entrepreneurship. You don't time block. Your time block when you work at a company is they want you there by 8:30, you leave there by 5:30. That's your time block. And then you might say, well, Billy's got ball practice over here. We got to get to that. Right. And so you have these other forces that drive how you use your time.
Yes.
Right. And what I quickly got into a really good habit of, but it took some time to understand how to do it well, was how to time block my schedule. And my Google Calendar looked like a rainbow, because I was I was doing government affairs work, and I was doing a lot of community and engagement stuff. I've been on a few different boards of directors, and a lot of those meetings started driving my time. But I also had to realize, well, you got to drive a half hour to get there, and you got to go here, and
margins.
Like my gas budget went through the roof to try to get to this open house and then be at this government affairs meeting, right. An hour after that closed. So you just, so much of understanding the resources available to you when you go out on your own and you are in this entrepreneurial phase is you understand and manage all of your resources. And time is the most valuable of all resources. And that time blocking piece is one of the things you got to get good at first. That's one of the first things you really need to get good at.
If you're taking notes, number one, you've got to master time blocking.
Yes, 100%.
Because it'll go haywire, right? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is that, and we're going into this vein now. We're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of entrepreneurship. And so I love step one is that you've got to master time blocking.
Yep.
And I think that is, and it's funny because it's not, okay, I need to master marketing. I need to master, my finances. I need to master what it is that I'm doing. No, it's literally the time blocking aspect of it. Because then you're right, that is your most valuable resource. That's what you use to do it all with is your time.
Exactly.
That's everything it is.
Right. Because money eventually just measures your time, right? It's just a way of understanding how your time measures to other things, right?
Correct.
And when you generate revenue or you bring in cash, you're essentially, that's kind of, I don't want to say your reward, but that's your measurement of what it is that you're doing. It tells you how valuable your productivity is. It tells you how valuable your marginal time is.
Yeah.
So that when you have to make a decision between doing two things, you understand which one is going to be more impactful to you overall, right? And I think that a lot of people focus on money, especially in the accounting industry, and that's the thing about entrepreneurship is a lot of people glorify the financial elements of being able to go out on your own, and
because there's no ceiling,
right? Absolutely,
and you're like, it's just going to all come in droves.
Yeah, and that's just not. That's not the real value in going out on your own. It's not the money; it's the freedom.
Oh,
right?
Come on, bro. Here we go.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's you. If you figure out how to be entrepreneurial, you figure out what you want to do, and then you figure out how to pay for it, right? And once you can pay for it, then you have the freedom to make whatever decisions you want. And that's really what people want out of entrepreneurship. They just don't understand how to equate it to that.
Correct.
Because it's not necessarily, they see the glorification of all the entrepreneurship, and a lot of times they don't show the gross stuff. Where I was working security, at bars at night because it was the only place I could make money from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. and so that was my third job at the time, because I had to figure out a way to make sure that the bills were paid. And I didn't have that backdrop of having, either familial wealth or a spouse that brought in a bunch of money that allowed me to go, kind of the grace to make those mistakes.
Yep. So Beau is an advocate of side hustles.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You got to have – look, I was having the conversation with my wife the other night, and I'm like, nowadays it is virtually impossible to really just make it on one source of income.
No, yeah. You really can't, because one source of income is generally just your office job.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the majority of America, is that it's an office job.
And even when you're in real estate, like you might be in an office 5 hours a week and that's it. But the reality is that's still kind of your office job until you start acquiring, say, rental properties, or you figure out a way to do leasing that gives you residual income, or whatever it is that you're going to pursue. Just using real estate as the example, there's many different niches that you can go, pursue.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do you use whatever avenue to generate revenue a certain way, right? And with like timberland, which is an example of what I talk with my dad about a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Timberland, you don't harvest trees every year. You harvest trees every 15 years. So you gotta make sure that the money that comes in from that is going to fund at least 10 years, until you come up to the next time that you need to harvest. And
right.
And a lot of that is about making the forest healthier overall, obviously, and some of that's about generating revenue to be able to pay the taxes and all that, the carrying costs of holding on to those assets, and then eventually if you go to sell it, there's obviously a windfall at the end, and you got to figure out, what do I do with that? Because you don't just sell an asset without having something better to do with your money.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's the thing that people are opportunistic, especially in a hot real estate market, residential, right now. All these people are selling their homes thinking I can get so much money for my home and I can upgrade. But the problem is, when you upsize in a hot market, you're overpaying for a much larger asset. So you're actually worse off in that situation. In a hot market, you should be downsizing because you're maximizing the value of the larger asset and only overpaying in a smaller asset that can take you into a different cyclical market. Right.
Right. And that has still opportunity to grow.
Yes.
If it's a lesser.
Absolutely.
Total sense. Yeah, it's crazy to think that there's a lot of people that are doing that and not realizing, what do I do with the cash that I get? Oh, we're going to buy bigger. But
right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Now, as far as on the entrepreneurship side, again, I like to know, really, I love the idea of the kind of the do's and don'ts. And we talked a little bit about this, and coming from, your background of accounting and as well as in the entrepreneurship journey, there are some, do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
Or there's some things that to kind of look out for. Let's say there's somebody that's considering, the entrepreneurship journey.
Right.
And they work a 9 to 5.
Right.
And I'm a huge advocate of that. I think everybody should have some kind of an entrepreneurship journey. Just give it a shot. Try. You don't know until you try.
Right.
But there are ways to do it on a calculated side.
Yes.
To where you're not creating, a tidal wave of, debt or a tidal wave of
recklessness.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, your advice on that up and coming, entrepreneur, of the do's and don'ts, and I love the time blocking management aspect of it. But yeah, let's go a little deeper on.
Yeah. So I volunteer and I teach financial literacy and entrepreneurship through Junior Achievement, which is a local and actually national charity, but it's about financial literacy. And the very first thing I lead off with in the entrepreneurship class is, in order to have a business, you have to have 3 things. You have to have a product or a service, you have to have a customer base, and you have to have a way to measure it. And everybody understands the first 2, but nobody understands the third one.
You said
right?
that way to measure it. I'm like, then my wheels started turning. I'm like, okay, what are we measuring?
Right. And it's like a science experiment, right?
Yeah.
You try to do the same thing over and over. You try to replicate what you do, but how do you know the difference between your efforts in one scenario or another if you're not measuring it as you go along? And
so am I wasting my time, or is my time working?
Exactly.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't understand what their marginal time is worth. And when you start measuring what you do well, right? That's where they come up with key performance indicators, or KPIs. You see that at larger companies generally, because those are the things that drive the way that they measure, or they drive the most important decisions that any organization is going to make.
So
right?
What are some practical ways of measuring? Give us some breakdown of measuring.
As an accountant, the very first thing I'm going to tell you is, you got to track your money, right? You got to have a good bookkeeper, right? You have to understand what it is that really is driving your revenues, right? Because your revenues is what pays for things, but where people get lost a lot of times is that they commit to a certain level of expenditures, right? Whether it's a lease, you got to pay that lease for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending on what you committed to. And you take on all these burdens in order to execute the revenue stream, right? And you have to know what you're spending, right, relative to the money that comes in.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's not enough people that just straight up budget for a household, where they say, I have this much money net in my paycheck every month. I know that after my rent's paid, I got $500 this pay period, right? And that $500 is buying things that, a lot of times aren't dedicated to savings or making money on your money. It's, it's going to the movie theater, which is great. I love doing that with my, going to the movie theater with
we all
my daughter
live life,
and all that.
right?
But,
we
right.
live
But,
life.
But a lot of times they don't set themselves up for success because they don't really know where their money's going. And as an accountant, I always preach to people, make sure you have a great bookkeeper that you trust.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that aren't very good. And when you try to do it yourself, most business owners are terrible at it.
They just don't have the experience level.
Right.
Like, and I look back and I'm like, been there, done that. Thankfully, I understand debits and credits.
Right. And you're ahead because your dad was an accountant in that sense.
I have no, I'll say it like this. Sometimes it can be a boring industry.
Very.
But the value that it brings is paramount, because I'm like, double entry accounting, man.
Right.
Money going out. What was it? Where's it going? If it was, I paid purchases for this, it was X, Y, and Z, and it's, coming out of my checkbook, but it's going into purchases, and it's maintaining a record of where the money's coming. My dad used to always say, money in, money out. money in, money out. How are you allocating every dollar that's spent? You know exactly what it is. And you're right. A lot of people don't have that, that knowledge or experience. So finding a good bookkeeper. All right, so we have time blocking management. We have finding a good bookkeeper.
Yep.
Which there's ones out there that are resources. You know, it's not inevitable that you have to go hire this most expensive firm to do it.
Right.
There's ways and means to Google research and ask around, or friends and family, or things that have some accounting background. You'll look, if they have a accounting background, you'll know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, it becomes very evident when people know numbers.
Yes.
You have a very different conversation.
Correct.
You just do.
Yeah. So we've got time blocking, we have bookkeeping. All right, let's get into some more.
Yeah. So I would, it's funny because we've kind of talked about the analogy of the Avengers, where you kind of have this crew around you and they all specialize in different things and they all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. And, my mom owns a flower shop, and my mom is the greatest florist you've ever seen ever, right?
That's her zone of genius.
Exactly. But I've told her when she first went into the business, I said, look, more than 50% of what you're going to have to do as a business owner has absolutely nothing to do with what you're good at, right? Like,
bro, 100%.
Right.
100%.
That although it's a beautiful arrangement, that arrangement's not going to collect money, right? Yeah. And make sure your bills are paid.
Right.
Bro,
you were conservative. You said I'm like, it's like 65% sometimes, and 35% is actually doing the do.
Absolutely.
And then it's the 65% on,
It's astounding how much you have to keep up with, and legal. Like, you got to have a lawyer, right? And it's not just one lawyer typically, because there's so much specialization in the legal industry that you typically have to have a couple of different attorneys that at your disposal, that when you have questions, you have to be able to get the right answers.
Yeah.
Because that prevents you from making a bigger mistake and spending a lot more time and money on it than you otherwise should.
Yeah. And
so to have all of those experts, in your kind of back pocket or in your corner,
of course,
is absolutely critical to success.
Yeah.
If you're not a real estate person, have a great real estate agent, and don't think that a residential agent can look at a commercial lease and even digest what it is that they're doing.
You make a great point, because sometimes people will feel like, and especially in the beginning of an entrepreneurship journey, and I want to get your take on this, is that they feel like they're saving money by doing it themselves.
Yeah, and that is very much, we call it the poor mentality, right? It's I don't want to use my money to have somebody else do something for me. So it's trying to be an expert in breadth, right? So you're trying to be, 75% effective in every element of what it is you're doing. But what that does is it makes you only about 50% effective in the whole organization or the whole effort of what it is you're doing, because you never really do anything that well. Because you're spread so thin that you're not able to focus on something enough.
The one thing that you are the absolute best at.
Yeah. And Gary Keller actually wrote a great book called The One Thing, and he talks a lot about that. That was a very profound, just conceptualization, because my parents' mentality was always, well, let's not pay somebody else to do it. Let's go up and try to do it ourselves. And
we're going to build the house ourselves.
Right. Exactly. And when it came to the landscaping, our landscaping was impeccable because that's what my mom was great at. Right. But when it came to some of the other elements of just running a household,
exactly,
you're just deficient, and your money is far better spent getting somebody else and building that relationship with somebody else as a vendor or a contact or whatever that can do something at least a 95% clip for you. It takes it off of your schedule, right? So it frees up time. So you're using money to free up the most valuable resource you have.
Right.
But you're also far more efficient in the way that the money is being allocated to the expertise, right? So it's always better to figure out who is worth paying in your circle and making sure that you spend the money to do it. because it's cheaper in the long run.
Oh, 100%.
It will
Because
always be cheaper in the long run.
I look at it like this, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. In this particular aspect, I would rather pay the guy to do something because I can be in my zone of genius and I will out earn what I'm spending worrying about what I'm paying the guy.
Absolutely.
So instead of me trying to save $2,000, I can go out and make $5,000 more and cover the $2,000 that I'm paying him, and I'm still ahead because I'm focusing on where my strength is.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times that it's a misconception that, I want to try to do as much of it as I can. I want to penny pinch, and I want to try to, in the beginning of it. And I'm not saying you have to go huge. You can do it in small incremental steps.
Yes,
But
as
the
you
key
should.
the key is just not, one, don't give up your 9 to 5, right?
Yes.
Don't
Yes.
don't just throw it all away and be like, you know what? I'm going to wake up and start a business, and I'm going to quit my job the next day.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how would you handle that if I'm in the normal corporate and I want to start a business and I'm being told, gosh, I need all of these things. I need to have, these resources, and I need to have people that are there to help me along the way.
Yep.
So that could be very overwhelming.
Right.
But, I always say eat the elephant one bite at a time. So kind of in that practical way of, how would you approach it if you're working corporate America and you want to start a business?
I think I would develop a framework. That's what working in a job affords you, right? You have that consistency. The stability is what you really give up.
That safety net.
Yes. And some people, they crave stability. And if you crave stability, entrepreneurship is probably not for you, right? You better stick in that role.
Man.
But if you're somebody that's you can handle the volatility of entrepreneurship, it generally is a great thing for you to do. I would develop a lot of the frameworks. There's marketing plans, brand, you got to have a brand. There's setting up LLCs and the legal side. There's
all of that is easily accessible nowadays in the world of information.
Mm-hmm.
Google is your best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot easier to do in today's world to get those boxes checked.
Yes.
And you're never going to be fully ready to go out on your own, because you're always going to be surprised or shocked by certain elements of what that journey looks like. But at the same time, that stability of a paycheck allows you to build a framework for what it is you're going to go off into the world to try to do, right? It's kind of like having a foundation of a house built. If you've got the foundation there, it's a lot easier to put up the walls and all of that in order to build the house.
100%.
And it just makes it a lot easier when the foundation is solid.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're able to kind of still use your, time management skills. You can develop your time management skills while you're working. I've seen it many times said, while you may be working a job, let's say 9 to 5, 9 to 6, or 8 to 5 or whatever, but it's what you do at the evening times and what you do on the weekends to be moving yourself forward into the direction you really want to go.
Right.
You can't be, binge watching Netflix, and you can't be,
Right.
goofing off a whole lot. If you're serious about this, it is going to take some time and effort to kind of work on learning, reach out to those that have gone before you, right? Always seek counsel. There's great ways of I'm sure entrepreneurship, for lack of better words, like clubs or organizations that you can come a part of that you can, learn some things, or events that you can go to, and all those types of things. So it looks like, keep the 9 to 5, work on the framework, beginning some of the things that, Beau had mentioned about time management, and then what about financial? What are some suggestions financially? Should I go out and get a $55,000 loan immediately to start my business, or should I?
Sometimes that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you have done the legwork, right? And we talked about a few different things, but if you're going to buy a productive asset with that loan,
Yeah, sure.
Loans are really a good thing if they're utilized correctly. But so much of what in America we we use debt
Consumer
for
debt.
consumptive behavior.
100%.
And we don't use debt for productive behavior like we should.
Like we should.
Exactly. So when you use debt for consumptive behavior, you're basically paying interest and making everything more expensive on something that goes away, right?
Here today, given to Goodwill 2 years later.
Exactly. And I think that when you use debt in a healthy way, it's what makes you go from maybe stable to wealthy.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
You hear that? Stable to wealthy. I like that.
It's
Excited to bring one of our sponsors to you today, Two Roads Hat Company. Two Roads Hat Company has been an amazing company to work with. It is one of the companies that Silver Fox Squad uses, and we call it the perfect brim. They have a great versatility of looks in straw and in felt. I absolutely love Two Roads. It's a small business, which we love to promote, and it's made here in America. So this is a great opportunity for you to go to tworoadshatscompany.com and pick up one of your new perfect brims. Okay.
Right. I mean,
You hear that? Stable to wealthy. I like
yeah, it's really if you start to get kind of over the hump, right, where you're bringing in more money, and it makes sense to bring in that excess capital through a loan, it might allow you to double your productive capacity. And in a lot of ways, there's enough synergy in doubling that productive capacity where it'll drive more than a 2x multiple on your revenue side. Right.
So you can out-earn the debt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it makes sense, because once the debt's gone, you still have the productive asset.
Right. And it's still generating income.
Right. And then you don't have the debt carry on it, that eats into your margins.
Well, one of the things too, I look at it like it puts skin in the game.
It does.
It kind of forces you to be like, I'm in this now, and now I'm obligated, personal guarantee, whatever, business, all those types of things. It really puts you in a point of, over the hump of I'm in this thing now.
Yeah.
It's either going to make it or fail, but I've got to be able to put effort into it.
Yeah.
And also would you recommend, during the meantime, let's say you're doing 9 to 5, working on developing the business, setting up a little savings along the way?
Yeah,
Just something practical.
Everybody in every single household should have some sort of a savings plan, some sort of financial plan, and I see it with a lot of my friends. Some people have very explicit budgets that they've developed for themselves, and one of the things that I do that was very, very effective was I would give myself $50 a week in cash, and that $50 a week in cash would be what I would spend on going out to lunch, grabbing a beer with my buddies or whatever, But that $50 in cash, once it was gone, you stopped spending.
What?
Yes. So, but it was a little technique that allowed me to conceptualize the way that I spend money, right? Because when you're just swiping a card, you don't really pay attention. And that's by design with the banks, right? Like that's by design.
So true.
And so when you've got that physical cash in your hand and you spend that $50,
it feels
you're done spending, because it forces you into a disciplinary like situation where you are disciplined enough to not reach into the bank account and spend more than that $50.
Right.
And I started finding that after a while, I never even spent through the $50, because I started realizing, okay, I can do this or that this week, but I started having money left over because I'd hit that wall so many times that wasn't a good feeling, and I just said, I'm not gonna keep spending, right? And but what that does is it keeps you away from the other money that you've got sitting in that checking account, right? Whether it just came from a paycheck or, maybe you've got your
an accumulation of money.
Right. You've got exactly. You've got a couple of months worth of savings saved up or whatever, but it allows your money to work for you when you're not busy spending it.
I love that, because it's something. It's $50 is not a tremendous amount of money. It's small. It's doable. It's a great way to begin. And what it sounds like you're really doing is establishing a habit.
Exactly.
And you're learning to kind of track your spending. And you're so true. It's so true. spending that cash or swiping that card, the feeling between the two
it's different.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
When you're giving them that money and that money's gone, it's like, woo, do I really want to spend? We've been teaching our girls very similar in that aspect of, they have their spending money and seeing sometimes watching their eyes kind of light up in budget as they're trying to figure out, do I really want to spend the money on that? Because it'll be gone. And there've been times where they, these are high schoolers and they will come to the realization like it's not worth it. I'd rather hold on to the money for a little bit longer. So it's just establishing little habits. Now in the entrepreneurship journey, that would help to, for me, I'm looking at it like help to me to learn spending, learn money management, because in essence, when you're running a business, it's really just 10x or 100x.
Right.
Same kind of concept, just more zeros behind it.
Right. Absolutely.
And you're learning and establishing things now that will set you up for success, in the long run. And it doesn't matter how big or small the business is. It could be a very small, I'm going to make, and we have several friends, they make their own jewelry. And they sell their jewelry. So this is not a multiple warehouse, trucks, employees type thing. But you can, it's really interesting to me on the business aspect that the concepts are the same.
Yes.
The zeros just get bigger.
Yes. And it's a great point that you make too, because one of the things that I like to describe to people is that the percentage is still the percentage, no matter how much the money is, right? So if you're going to earn 10% interest, whether it's $100 or $100,000, right? It's still 10% on your money, right? You're still 10% ahead on your money, no matter how small or big it is. The one thing with entrepreneurship, though, that you have to be careful of is that your fixed costs can often be a much larger percentage of what it is you're doing, because if you've got the same $1,000 for rent when you're making $1,000 a week versus $100,000 a week, that rent as a percentage of what your overall revenue is a much higher number, right?
Until your revenue stream increases.
Right, absolutely. So you have to really conceptualize, what are true fixed costs, what's truly in my budget, and then everything beyond that budget that you're bringing in, make sure that every dollar is working for you, where you're getting a 10% or 5% or whatever it is the interest is, or whatever it is the excess productive capacity that is derived from that money. Make sure that money's working for you. And one of the things that I'm very minimalist. I like having very high quality things, but I don't like having much.
Love that concept.
It simplifies your life.
Yeah.
You're not, and one of the things I tell to people, I'm like, if you've got an entire attic of Christmas stuff and you've got a fourth bedroom that you don't even use because it's full of stuff, you're paying a mortgage on that. And so every item that's in that room takes up a certain volume of your overall home space, and it's costing you more and more and more money. And it's like, is that really worth that extra money to store?
Is that
because you're paying to store for it?
$50,000 over 30 years?
Right. And I know that that's almost ridiculous in a way, but it's a way to understand that I'm spending so much more than I need to because I refuse to get rid of stuff that I don't use.
I love it, man. And that's, again, within the business realm as well. Entrepreneurship, you will have times where I love that concept. I'd rather have fewer things, higher quality. So one of the things that I always look at, especially in the businesses that I've run, is that you can start by maybe not necessarily buying the best of the best when you're doing things, but you realize that if you can get to the place of buying the best of whatever that is, if it's a tool or if it's a machinery or if it's something, the investment is so worth it because it increases productivity, longevity, the asset sticks around and it does what it's supposed to do. All those types of things, in the long run, it does pay off over time. You don't need to have 50,000 things. I also look at it like you get some things to start your business, and as the business grows, you change equipment.
Yeah.
Sell the old equipment.
Yes.
And then use some of those resources to invest into the other things. There's always ways to be able to improve your business flow of, your assets that you use to generate revenue.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I always kind of have a way to look at the things that I own, as I say, if I'm going to buy something, it's got to replace two things.
Oh,
Right. So if I'm going to buy a new suit,
okay.
right, it's got to replace two things in my closet.
Really?
Right? Because I'm trying to drive from quantity to quality.
So you can get rid of two things. Man, you don't want to see my closet. If my wife's going to watch this episode, she'd be like, "Did you just hear what he said?" He said, "Anytime you get something new, you got to replace two. Get that new for two. For two."
Sometimes it's worth paying for extra space.
Oh, yeah. In my wardrobe, yeah, I'm paying for extra space.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it is what it is.
But again, your suits though are productive assets for what it is that you do. It's part of your brand.
I get that. Thank you, Beau. Thank you.
And it's it's very different for you than I think that a lot of people, because a lot
normal
of people,
everyday people. Yeah,
not
that I'm not. No, I'm saying like the typical. I go to work and I work. Even if I have like a uniform that I wear, I'm a mechanic or a plumber, and there's a certain uniform that I wear. They're not going to have 55 suits and 100 pairs of shoes in their closet. Nothing wrong with that. It's a different trade, but yeah, you're right. It depends on the individual and what it is that they're doing in regards to what they have, and I get that. I get that.
Absolutely, and that's having a presentable or being presentable whenever you walk into a room, that helps you when you're an entrepreneur, right? Because people are gonna look at you and you're gonna have a presence when you walk into the room for the first time, and it's the reason why a lot of financial advisors drive BMWs and stuff, when it's some of that's a facade.
Yes,
but it's supposed to drive credibility in the minds of the people that you're talking to, and I understand that, and I would just caution that buying brand new BMWs is not always a great financial decision for most people.
No. But dressing to impress, and I love saying that it doesn't need to be $1,000 suit. It can be, one that you can find at a really good sale, seasonal sale, and spend $100 and have it tailored, and you'll look amazing. Not that it always has to be a suit, but I'm using that as an example that you want to dress for success and look your best when you're presenting, especially on the business aspect. I don't care if you've been in business 6 months or 20 years. If the guy that's doing it for 6 months and he is tight and right and shows up, and the guy has been 20 years and doesn't even, it looks like he's rags to riches and he's not put together well, they're going to be looked at in different ways. And that's a whole testament of a whole nother rabbit trail of talking about how well to dress and what to wear and how to wear and all those kinds of things. So definitely love the idea of making sure you're presenting yourself in the best form and fashion, for sure. Yep. Man, we've done really well on the entrepreneurship side. We're going to change subjects a little bit now because I want to have a little bit of fun, and not that this wasn't fun, but you know what I'm saying. Get into a little bit more lighthearted things. Yep. Great notes on the entrepreneurship. Rewatch. Man, I'm like mentally, I'm gonna have to watch. I'm like, ooh, okay, I like that. Buy one to replace two. That's a good one right there. Yep. So let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes on Fashion Week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all
so
right.
I know that Beau has done a lot with Fashion Week. So talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done, and I'd love to your take on how you've seen us grow, and the direction that you see us going in. Yep. So get your take on that.
Yeah, so I really started helping because of Jimmy Budd.
Yeah.
A great friend. He and I got to kind of know each other when I was at the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey.
Right.
And I love logistics. I just think logically, and I just see things like that, and I work in a very logistical framework. Mm-hmm. When I'm on my feet and I'm trying to work. And so helping him put on events was a great way for me to kind of use that logistical mindset that I have.
And the events are very logistical.
And honestly, for me at the beginning of my journey, putting on events, I knew was going to be part of the rest of the entrepreneurial journey for me, like in terms of my long-term, projectability of what I was trying to do. Sure. So, naturally, to help Jimmy put on some concerts, and we did New Year's Eve, a couple times, and the Fashion Week stuff. It was, I was the guy that was moving a lot of tables and chairs. I mean, and I know that sounds maybe simplistic, but that's really
a huge part of it, though.
Right? Like, it's all the stuff from behind the scenes that nobody sees that those are the things that need to get done. And when the models show up and there is mirrors with lighting and food, for them to snack on throughout the day, and there's, somebody had to put that stuff there, right? Somebody had to logistically organize those things in order to service the other elements of the event, right?
And for the event to be able to run smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's so much of behind the scenes where you look at it like, hey, we did it this time. Let's try maybe doing it a little bit different this way. You're there as that advisory role to kind of help steer the ship of, looking at it on a logistical aspect and getting into the nuts and bolts of it of saying, hey, this is how we could do things a little bit better.
Right. And I remember stories like, I remember vividly Jimmy and I driving like a 32-foot box truck down to Strawberry Hill Raceway to pick up, hundreds of tables and, hundreds of chairs. And, and we had to plan out the entire week of like, where do these tables need to be on what day? And those chairs need to be there on a different day. And,
sure.
And making multiple trips, back and forth just to execute one event, and
it's so much involved, people.
Yeah.
There's a lot involved.
There's so much of that. And, that's one of the things that, for Jimmy is he's really kind of helped grow what the true functional part of Fashion Week is.
Yes.
Is that, you kind of have to, like we were talking about before, you kind of have to do some of that stuff on your own so it's a little more affordable at first.
Yeah.
But then you have to figure out what's worth your time and money, right? And we quickly realized that it's cheaper for us, time relative to money, to outsource that, to have somebody else deliver the tables and chairs, even if we've got a couple of guys there to like lay it all out and set it all up once it gets there. And that that's just a very simple example of an adjustment that we made over time that, now we aren't doing tables and chairs like we used to,
right.
and
but we're
it's
getting
a lot
bigger
more efficient.
venues, and we're being able to have more
leverage in those conversations,
impactful relationships, and developing to be able to grow the brand instead of worrying about tables and chairs.
Exactly.
I love it, man.
Exactly.
It's so cool.
And I mean, RV Fashion Week is just, it was such a great idea, but it's just skyrocketed compared to where we were when I first started helping them. I mean,
we're the real deal right now, bro.
Yeah, it's
kicking. It's on
very different level.
All cylinders compared to like back in the day, even before my time. 3 or 4 people doing this entire thing.
Right
now, it's a huge team. Now we're growing. And it's taking the span of a week now, and multiple events, and how we're getting the city involved and organizations and everything like that. So
more events, bigger venues, like all of it. And I mean, those are the things that, and Jimmy is a master at building those relationships. I mean, he just really does a wonderful job with that. And, it's a big reason why I think we have such a great team of people that,
sure.
that, we have so many great experts in certain areas that collaborate extremely well. And, the one thing as being more of an accountant and more of kind of an analytical type is I'm in a room full of artists. And so I've kind of this weird minority of sorts of like, you have all these great ideas and these big ideas, and it's all this beautiful artistry and
the
fashion and all, right, like
casting the vision.
Yeah.
My man Beau's over here like, okay, how do we practically put this into paper and practice? And what's the next logical step on how we make this actually come to fruition?
And that was, again, it's kind of me taking those blind spots or those areas that I wasn't as strong in, and putting myself in a room full of people who are more visionary and more artistic and more, they think differently. And that is so critical to the journey, because if you're not getting around people that are far better than you,
so many
you're
things.
never going to grow, and I've always tried to be the dumbest person in the room.
Right.
I've always tried to be the dumbest guy in the room. And that tells you something about where the type of room you're in. Right. And when you have more to gain from being around other people, that can accelerate your growth, and it can also prevent mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of that journey. And in that sense, like, sometimes in that entrepreneurial journey, you just have to chase every opportunity that's available to you, right? And sometimes you're that squirrel that chases after, whatever nut you can find heading into the wintertime, because you're not sure what opportunity is gonna present itself at any time. And so one of the phases of that entrepreneurial journey is literally chasing every opportunity that comes your way.
I love it.
But the problem with that is so many people get spread too thin, and they don't realize that the next phase is that you've got to then start paring down those things. Boy. Those, and you need to start being more specific in the things that you're doing and you're spending your time on.
100%.
So
we've had that discussion so many times because I'm like 10 layers deep, but then you start narrowing and narrowing and narrowing down. So
yep. And then once you start getting enough resources and you've got enough people around you and enough different teams set up, then you can chase more opportunities again. I mean, it's almost like an hourglass where you chase as many opportunities as you can. You got to figure out which ones are the most productive and focus in those areas to drive more revenue. And when you get those revenue streams more solid, then you can start branching out again, because that extra income or that extra money that you've got available to you affords you more opportunities.
I love it, man.
So,
Bo, this is so good, bro. I'm like, we need to have like a part 2. We got
anytime, man.
We could dig so further down it. But listen, audience, there's so many nuggets within this episode. I mean, bro, we burned through the episode. Can you believe it?
Yeah, right.
I knew we would. I knew we would. So there's so many good things there that I can't wait to just go back and rewatch it for myself. And we may even get into where. And I'll think about this and we can discuss a little more too, Bo, is that we might take one of these little segments and we may dive a little bit deeper, really get into the practical teaching aspect of it. I think there's some good stuff there. So, we've got to the point now in the episode where, I mean, we just go on and on and on, but at some point I'm like, nope, we're going to save that for another one. We're going to save that for another one. But I have a point where I like to always ask, my guests some fun, lighthearted, rapid fire questions. Just the first thing that comes off. Nothing too serious, but one of the things that I love to do is if there was one app on your phone that you couldn't live without, what would it be?
One app
on your phone.
Oh, Google Calendar.
Right? Because he said it's like a rainbow. I remember. It's that time blocking, time management.
It's because it's become so critical to me. Once I started to have to time block. Yeah. And I learned that as an exercise, and it has become so ingrained in if it does not get in my calendar, it does not get done. And that goes for taking spin classes to going on golf trips and stuff. I mean, it's the fun stuff too. But if you don't manage your most valuable resource,
it's gonna be gone.
Yeah,
you'll be sitting around wasting it. Exactly. And then you'll be like, I didn't get a thing accomplished.
Right.
Oh, I forgot. It wasn't in my calendar.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, man. All right. And then the last question I like to ask this one is, what's the best advice for your 20-year-old self?
Whoa.
So looking at yourself when you were 20.
Yeah.
And of course, obviously, hindsight's always 20/20, but what would you tell your 20-year-old self? Best advice.
I was full of piss and vinegar back then, boy. There's a lot of advice I could give myself.
You just give him one. Give him one.
I think in a way there was so much arrogance in who I was at that time.
Bro, who wasn't?
It's a natural phase for a 19, 20, 21-year-old guy.
We know it all.
Like, right. I mean, and I think that there was so much insecurity underlying what that arrogance was. Mm-hmm. And I think I would have told myself to shut up and find more mentors earlier, because it would have accelerated my time frame on a lot of these things that I'm doing now in my 40s. And I think I would have told myself, look, man, find the best mentors you can and listen as hard as you can.
Man, that is, bro, I'll take that advice today.
Right. Oh, I'm still seeking mentors at this point because, being 41, there's a lot of guys at the end of their career arc in their, mid 60s that have so much experience that, that's my next level of growth, right? Like they're the ones that I have to attach my next phase of personal growth to, by finding those mentors they've got the experience and not as much of the energy anymore.
Right.
And
that head knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So, man, that's excellent. That's probably one of my favorite answers thus far. Is
Thank you.
Shut up, shut up,
Right.
and find the best mentors, and it would have accelerated so much or eliminated a lot of the roadblocks or issues that we've had in life. A lot sooner.
Yep.
That's really, really good. Well, the last thing I like that for my guest is, how can my audience find you?
I mean, I'm all over social media.
Yeah. Tell them social
Instagram
media.
at Beau Brown.
Okay. All right. Any other socials that you're active on?
I've Facebook. I've had Facebook for a long time. I just don't spend as much time on it anymore. But
I get it.
I'm also more of a behind the scenes guy. So like a lot of the promo stuff is not necessarily up my alley as much.
Right. But that head knowledge my boy Beau's got, man.
Yeah.
It's out there, man. I love it. Well, that's it. We did it, man. We got through the episode.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, bro. I
really appreciate it.
Really had a great time. We have some good nuggets on this one, man.
First time we sat down for a one-on-one. We
What,
sat
like
for
5 hours?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I remember I was like, man,
We can burn through it.
So many similarities. And I didn't even really know about the timber. Because my father's side of the family, we're going to digress for just a minute. My father's side of the family was all in the timber in the hills of West Virginia.
Really?
So my namesake, the first, Stephen Gerard Atkins the first, was, like the accountant for a lumber company and was out there. And even to the point, I don't remember the exact terminology, the one where he goes out and assesses the land to decide on what's to be done, and did all of that. So I have all of that in my side of the family way back in the day.
That's amazing.
Cool.
That's amazing.
Cool. Well, that's it, guys. We got through the episode. I really appreciate you all staying with us today. Again, thank you, Beau. Appreciate you being here, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Wealth of knowledge, man. And just to know that some of that stuff is so good, we may have to come back around and dig in a little deeper. But we appreciate the subscription to the channel and liking and commenting. Let us know what you think about the episode. Did you catch anything on this time that you were like, man, that's a good nugget, or I'm going to use that in practical ways? And of course, Beau's social will be down below. If you may have a question, they may reach out and just
absolutely
question, that kind of thing. But we look forward to seeing you again soon, and we'll catch you the next time. Appreciate you watching all the way till the end today, and thanks again for being a part of the Suit Up podcast. So we have a new way of support here at Suit Up with Patreon. You can subscribe in different tiers to support the show. The great news is that each has a different tier, and within that tier, there are different levels of access that you will have to myself, but all will support the show in a major way. So one of the tiers may be access to questions or interaction. Another tier may be an opportunity where you could submit photos or get some wardrobe advice. And even another tier, we may even be able to set up a personal Zoom call where you and I interact for 15, 20, 30 minutes. So these would be great ways that allows access to get some of those questions and some of the things that you'd like done answered. Now, naturally, if you can't support monetarily, we totally understand, but you can always subscribe for free and like and share our video with your friends and audience that you feel would enjoy watching Suit Up. So thanks again for joining. All right, guys, today's show was sponsored by my very own company, Fox Edge Grooming Products. So we have a whole line of men's grooming products that I personally use and personally helped kind of formulate and come up with the idea and concept. We use all natural ingredients, and believe you me, the whole line smells fantastic. I love it. Anybody that ever smelled it says, wow, this stuff smells great. So if you want to get your own Fox Edge hair care or beard line products, you can go to my website, which is www.stephenatkins.us. And of course, the link will be in the description below. So looking forward to seeing you guys with the Fox Edge.